Chapter 7 Conviction, Conviction, Conviction. Jefferson County Courthouse, September 12, 1986. It's amazing what money and revenge will do to people. It can change them from the inside out, make them ugly, shine through in ways that God Himself would be ashamed of. I watched Reggie give up on the stand, and I wondered how rejection by one girl could make a man so small-hearted and mean. Lord knows if I could go back in time and not date two sisters at once, I would. If I had known that it had created in him such jealousy and rage that he was willing to lie and frame me for murder, actually put me to death over it, well, I would have paid for them to go out on a date myself. He worked at Quincy's and had told Smotherman that he knew a guy who fit the description of the man who robbed him. At least now I knew how my name had come up in this mess. And I knew what my life was worth to Reginald Payne White, $5,000, the amount of reward I heard he was getting for cracking the case and helping to catch a killer. Imagine this was just ice on the cake for Reggie. The snake was finally ready to strike after all these years. Defense testimony to begin in Restaurant Slang's trial. The first person to identify Hinton as the robber was Quincy's employee Reginald White. White, who has known Hinton since 1974, said 2 weeks earlier before the robbery, Hinton questioned him about how good Quincy's business was and the time the restaurant closed. The lawyers had argued about Reggie taking the stand when the jury was out of the room. My lawyer lost. I'd like to believe that the reason Reggie wouldn't look at me while he testified was because he had a conscience and wouldn't have been able to lie as well if he had to do so while looking me in the eye. Did he know they wanted to kill me? Did he understand what he was saying? Did he know how much bigger this was than any girl he had dated since we were kids? Or was he like every other young and poor black man in Jefferson County, just trying to get a little extra cash to make it through? I couldn't understand how a life could mean so little. We weren't friends, but until that day I had no idea we were mortal enemies. I watched him on the stand, feeling important, maybe for the first time in his life. State your name, please, Mr. White. Reginald Payne White. Where do you live? What county that is? Jefferson County, Bessemer. Where do you work? Quincy's Family Steakhouse. How long have you worked there? 9 years. After baseball ended, I had seen Reggie at Quincy's. My mom and I like to go there sometimes for the salad bar mainly. The brother of the sisters I was dating also worked at Quincy's. I hadn't been to that Quincy's in years, not since it came out I was dating the sisters. Their brother didn't want to see me, neither did their mom. Because of me, the family was torn apart for a while, and I regretted the harm I had caused. I had put all that behind me, as had the family, but it must have stayed fresh in Reggie's mind. He and I had to run into each other at the beginning of July, a few weeks before I was arrested. We had a harmless conversation, but Reggie was taking that little bit of truth and creating a whole drama out of it. My stomach turned over. I wondered if anyone had thrown up in open court before. Directing your attention to the month of July 1985, sometime during that month, did you have an occasion to have a conversation with a man named Anthony Ray Hinton? Yes, sir. And do you see Anthony Ray Hinton in the court today? Yes, sir. Where is he? Right here. He pointed at me, but made sure his gaze went over the top of my head. The man sitting at the end of the bench, the defendant. Yes, sir. How long have you known Anthony Ray Hinton? Maybe a total of 6 years. I watched as Reggie fidgeted as they asked him about running into me. I had been waiting for Sylvia to get off work, and he had driven up and parked near me. We said hello, talked about what we were doing. He told me he still worked at Quincy's, and I asked if the brothers still worked there and the manager that I knew. Then I went on my way, and he went on his way. A chance encounter. A bit of chit-chat at the end of the hot day in the middle of the summer. And now he said I was waiting there for him, as if I knew he would be there, and he was scared when he saw me. He reached for his gun he kept in his car. I could feel my legs begin to shake as he testified. He was making things up, straight up lying under oath. All right, anything else? Then he asked me about how was business. I told him it was normal. Then he asked me, did we still close at the same time? I told him, yeah, we closed at 10, through the weekend, and 11 on weekends. He asked you what time you closed at Quincy's? Yes, sir. Did you tell him anything about Quincy's? I told him Sid, Mr. Smotherman. I didn't call him no name. I told him we had a nice old manager. He had just bought a new Fiero. You told him that you had a what now? A nice old manager that had just bought a new Ferrero. You told him the type of car? Yes, sir. So that was it. I had used Reggie to find out when the place closed and what kind of car. I looked at perhaps. Was he catching this? Say this craziness was true. Didn't make sense that Reggie told me they closed at 11, but I hadn't chosen a night when I started a work shift at midnight behind the razor fence with a guard and locked doors to sneak out, rob, and murder a man, and then sneak back in. Did they think I was the Terminator? Why wouldn't I have just robbed him on a night off I had? I couldn't be it couldn't be for an alibi because I certainly hadn't been clever enough to set up alibis for myself and the other two murders. All this ran through my head. I wanted to stand up in court and become my own lawyer. Walk the jury through it. There was no logic to the story they were creating. It was like they had picked me as the killer and then went about twisting the reality to make me fit into the plot they were creating. Why wouldn't I have just gotten there early and waited for some other men to leave like I was supposed to have done at the first two murders? Why would I follow him around the grocery store and then carjack him in the road while in my car? I didn't like the cleverest, coolest killer to walk these streets. I sound like the dumbest criminal in the world. Somehow I had missed him at point blank range with my gun, but had been amazing at scaling fences, switching cars, traveling at supersonic speed, and making it back over the fence, past the guards, through the locked doors, all in time to scrape off gum off the bathroom floor. Where was the money? Where were my bloody clothes? Where were the snags on my clothes from climbing over a 15-foot razor wire fence? Where was the heavy, dark sedan with which I had carjacked Sid Smotherman? Where did I get it from? And where did I switch for my small red Nissan? Was I a superhero? Was I James Bond? I must have been to accomplish all of this and still clean out under the dumpster when my supervisor asked me to. I don't know if what was going through my mind started showing my face, but perhaps cleared his throat and put a hand on my shoulder as he got up to question Reggie. Mr. White, how are you doing? How are you doing? Mr. Wright, you know my client. You and he used to play softball together, didn't you? Yes, sir. Not on the same team, though. No, sir. And you also knew him because you know a man named Quentin Leith. Yes, sir. Got a bunch of sisters. Yes, sir. He dated one and you saw one. Yes, sir. Now, we're talking back in 79 and 80, aren't we? Yes, sir. And this gentleman with whom you have spoken on a friendly basis on and off for years, haven't you? Yes, sir. When you met him, you're friendly to him, aren't you? Yes, sir. And when you and he have met, he's been courteous in front of you. Yes, sir. I could hardly sit there and listen to this. Perhaps just move on to the next topic from the sisters, and he didn't even get it right. I had told him everything about Reggie, what had happened, what he used to say about me. I had given perhaps Reggie's motive for lying, but he was acting like he was asking about the weather. Now, in the conversation that you had with him and Hoover, it was you who told him about who was working out there, wasn't it? Yes, sir. He wasn't taking any notes with any powder pencil either, was he? No, sir. Perhaps went on to ask him if he was married or about to be. I didn't know what that was about. It didn't even make sense. All right. And that's all the conversation consisted of, wasn't it? Yes, sir. You left and went about your business? Yes, sir. He walked off? Yes, sir. That's all I have. And that was that. No mention of the reward money. No catching him in his lies. No showing that he had it in for me for years. Nothing but the kind of talk you'd hear on my mama's porch any old afternoon. I went back to my cell every night after trial and replayed the day in my head. They had traced all the bullets, they called it, chain of custody from the victims to the hospital, to the police, to the crime lab. The police testified about arresting me. They didn't mention the blank piece of paper they wanted me to sign or the fact that they said the gun hadn't been fired in a long time. Anything true that didn't make me a killer was left out or just plain lied about. My only hope was our ballistic expert. Percaps had hired him, and he had done tests and concluded that the bullets didn't match the gun. I knew they couldn't have, but the state's experts said they had. They were either bad at their job or lying, and it was hard for me to truly wrap my mind around the fact that all these people would just lie to put me to death. What had I done to them? Why me? The questions kept me up all night. I thought back to when I was arrested. I replayed that last afternoon over and over in my head. Why would I have walked to the porch if I had known what was going on? Or would I have run? Innocent men don't run, except sometimes innocent men need to run. This is true in Alabama and everywhere. If you're poor and black, sometimes your best and only chance is to run. I imagined running up into the woods that bordered our backyard or down the street towards the highway, but where could I have run to? Everything I was and loved and cared about was in a few mile radius of that house. Would they have shot me? Probably. Sometimes I played the movie out in my head. Me running and getting shot in the back, my mom crying, Lester strung up, and Sylvia the neighbors all gathered around my body as I breathed my last breath. There were no good end to running in my mind, but there were rights when it seemed like dying on the pavement would have been a whole lot easier than proving my innocence in a courtroom. I shouldn't have had to prove I was innocent. They're supposed to prove I was guilty, but not in this courtroom. I missed my mom and I missed Lester, and I hated that they would have to sit in this courtroom and hear the lies. I had broken up with Sylvia about a year ago, told her to move on because I didn't know how long I was going to be caught up in this mess. Sylvia was a good girl, and I know her family wouldn't want her with me until my name was cleared. I didn't want her hanging on when I didn't know myself when this nightmare would end. I had been in this county jail for what felt like forever, and I couldn't even begin to think about what would come next if I was found guilty. My mind would just shut down when I tried to think of it. I had to believe that a miracle would happen. God never fails, hadn't my mom said as much to me since the time I could walk. God never fails. I needed them to catch the guy who had done it. I needed my ballistics expert to get on that stand and prove that there was no way my mama's old gun could have killed anybody. He was my only hope. Wednesday, September 1986. DA, his testimony, death bullets not from a gun at Hinton's house. Prosecutors today challenged the testimony of a defense witness who said the bullets used in the 1985 slayings of two restaurant managers and the shooting of a third were not fired from the gun found at Anthony Ray Hinton's house near Dora. He didn't know what in the world he was talking about, said Deputy District Attorney Steve Mahone during closing remarks this day. Andrew Payne, a retired Army colonel, is a professional witness who will come into court and testify about almost anything, Mahone said. Payne said he is a consulting engineer and has testified in about 1,000 court cases. 2 of these cases involved firearm identifications, he said. Mahone called Payne's report the height of responsibility. The firearm evidence is the main link prosecutors have to the murders. Andrew Payne never had a chance. He did a great job of perhaps working him through all the ways that the bullets didn't match the gun. He was an expert, although a bit socially awkward and too nerdy for the jury to really relate to, but he did the job. His findings proved I was innocent. For a minute, I felt a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. I turned and sent a quick smile to my mom and Lester, and then it was the state's turn to cross-examine. Mahone started out easy, nice almost, but it was a setup right from the start. It's your testimony, sir, that you have used comparison microscopes in excess of 1,000 times. I would say yes, sir, about 1,000 times. And you are familiar with the comparison microscope that Mr. Yates has. Well, not familiar with it. It was the first time I ever used or seen an American Optical. American Optical is a pretty obscure brand. Well, I wouldn't say it's an obscure brand, but I never operated one before. As a matter of fact, when you're looking at it at the Smotherman projectile there at the laboratory or the Department of Forensic Science, you had to ask Mr. Yates how to cut on the light source for the comparison microscope, did you not? Very possible, in fact, probably did, yes. And as a matter of fact, after he told you how to do it, you reached over to your immediate right and threw the switch on an electric inscribing tool that was on a shelf next to the microscope, did you not? Very possible, yes, sir. You did that, didn't you? It went from bad to worse after that. It turns out he didn't even know how to use the microscope after he found the light. And then he didn't know whether or not there was controls to raise the glass up or down, or how to switch the magnification lenses. He tried to ask the state's expert for help. He dropped the bullets. I looked over at Perkins. It was his fault. Didn't he know all this? He looked surprised. Had Payne not told him how it went at the lab? Well, let me ask you this. Did you say I don't seem to be able to see the bullet? I can see the mirror and I can see my finger fine. It is very possible that I said that. That would be one of the problems you would have when you're trying to locate the high power glass. That's why I asked for instructions. I took a deep breath. My expert was whining and complaining on the stand that the other expert wouldn't help him. Things only got worse when they showed that some of his slides came straight out of a firearms book they held in their hands, a book that was from 1956. Mahone asked him to refer to page 6 in Payne's book. Page 6, did you say 6? Yes, sir, go ahead. We're in that paragraph at the bottom of the page begins with the title, The Charlatans. Mahone started reading from the book. Following the invention of photography and plastic impressions was a heyday of charlatans. Very few judges knew anything about firearms. They had heard rumors of marvelous developments. The world was willing to accept anything said to be almost any. I think that word's scientific rather than specific. Now, Payne was helping the prosecutor read correctly the text that called him a charlatan. I think I even heard someone in the courtroom gasp. Yes, sir. Scientific, I'm sorry. Almost anyone was permitted to testify in court as an expert. Many had little knowledge but a natural core presence and a great deal of gal. For $50 a day, a lot of money in those days, they would go cheerfully in court and swear to almost anything. With a pair of outside calipers, an ordinary hand magnifying glass, and a steel gauge, that was the third instrument you took, and I think that's a steel scale. If you still look at it more carefully, you will have your scale you took with you on the 29th of July with you today, do you not? Yes, sir. Hold it up to the jury. I watched his Payne head up the scale that the prosecutor had just described as one of the handmarks of a charlatan. Was this going over his head? Did he not see what everyone else in the courtroom saw? Sure, without trying to be facetious at this particular time, because this is such a serious matter that I hate to use any levity, but mine must be twice as good as the one they're talking about in the book, because mine is graduated in 64th. Mahone ignored the attempt at humor and just kept reading. They would carefully swear away the life of an innocent man or free for further depredations against society the most atrocious criminal. Sure, Mr. Payne, do you have any problems with your vision? Why, yes. How many eyes do you have? One. That's all? I could do nothing but lay my head down in my arms and cry. I knew at that moment I was going to be convicted of murder. I was innocent, and my one-eyed expert had just handed the prosecution a guilty verdict. Nothing mattered anymore. I took the jury 2 hours to find me guilty. It took them 45 minutes to determine my punishment, death. In that moment, I had felt my life shatter into a million jagged pieces around me. The world was fractured and broken, and everything good in me broke with it. 2 months later, right before Judge Garrett affirmed and read out loud the official death sentence, I told them what I hoped to be true. God would reopen this case, and if not, they would take my life, and they would never ever touch my soul.